Xtalks connects professionals in the life science, medical device, and food industries with useful content like webinars, job openings, articles, and virtual meetings to help you succeed in your career. This life science focused podcast brings together some of our editorial staff to share insights into the latest B2B industry news to keep you up to date.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Aisha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com, and this week I'm joined by a very special guest on the show, Marci English, who is the Vice President and Head of BioPharma Development at Astellas Pharma. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Marci.
No, thank you. Glad to be here.
Likewise, looking forward to the conversation. Awesome. So Marci, could you start off by telling us a bit more, first of all, about Astellas Pharma and the type of, pipelines and the type of work that the company is involved in?
Sure. So Astellas Pharma is a Japanese pharmaceutical company. We're headquartered in Tokyo, Japan, but we have a very large global presence. Specifically, we have a large U.S. headquarters located in Northbrook, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago, and that's where I am based out of. And then we have research and development facilities on both the east and west coasts of the United States. We have a location in the Netherlands. But indeed, we're a Japanese pharmaceutical company. I think a lot of people may know Astellas for a drug called Myrbetriq, which is for overactive bladder, but we actually are also very active in the oncology space. We have a product called Xtandi, which is really the leader in treating prostate cancers, and also have a number of legacy products like tacrolimus, which is for transplant. It's a transplant drug that's really, again, kind of a leader in that space. But Veozah, which I'm here to talk to you about today a little bit, is in women's health, which is a new space for Astellas.
Wonderful. And so could you tell us a bit more, of course, about the exciting new approval of Veozah, which happened just a couple of weeks ago, for the treatment of moderate to severe hot flashes and night sweats due to menopause?
Yeah, we're really excited about Veozah and really proud of this approval. As many of your listeners may or may not know, there really has been kind of a divestment in women's health, and not a lot of companies out there developing therapies for women's health indications. So again, really proud that Veozah is leading the charge to elevate that dialogue at the societal level about how something like hot flashes is so impactful to women's health. And now we have a mechanism by which we can help women treat their hot flashes.
Right. And so very important that you're talking about women's health and how it's often so overlooked. And it's wonderful that Astellas is working in this space and with this kind of a milestone approval, I would say, for this drug. And so what unmet need was there in the area specifically that Veozah helps address?
Right. So back in the early 2000s, there was a study done. We all know that probably what we should start with is like, why do we even have hot flashes? And a lot of people know that hormone therapy has been used to treat hot flashes historically. But it's only been in recent history that we've really understood why you have hot flashes. And hot flashes actually originate in the brain. And when a woman is not in menopause, this neuron in the brain called the KNDy neuron is balanced by estrogen and another compound called neurokinin B. And it acts in equilibrium. And this neuron's located in the temperature control center of the brain. So it helps maintain that feeling of, homeostasis and sort of like even temperature. when estrogen declines during menopause, that neuron gets unbalanced. And what hormones do, or hormone therapy does, is it comes in and replaces that estrogen and recreates that balance. When that neuron's unbalanced, it tells the body that it's hot when it's not. So it triggers that sweating and what everybody knows about hot flashes, the flushing, etc. Fezolinetant, or Veozah, as it's now known by its brand name, works via a non-hormonal mechanism of action. So it comes in and it treats the hot flash, not by replacing estrogen, but by decreasing the ability of this compound called neurokinin B to bind to that neuron. So it recreates that homeostasis. So it's really only been very recently that we've even understood like why women get hot flashes. But your original question was, why is this an unmet need? What do we know about it? One of the things Astellas has done, and I've been really proud of, and I was part of this at the onset of the program, is we went out and we interviewed a lot of women about what the hot flash experience was like. And what we learned, like many aspects of women's health, is that there's a stigma. And there's a stigma about talking about hot flashes. There's a stigma about talking about women's health. And women it was one of those things where I think historically it's like, well, this is something you're going to have to deal with.
Right.
And really it's not something that we have to deal with. What we found was that it's a huge impact on women's ability to do the things they want to do, the ability to feel good about themselves. Your listeners can't see, but I am the demographic for this drug. I'm in my 50s. I know what a hot flash feels like, and it is not pleasant. It's not a pleasant experience. And when that's happening over and over and over again during the day, it's uncomfortable, it's sweaty, it's not good. And I think another aspect when we think about that experience is that, it's a time in our lives when women are typically at the peaks of their careers.
Yes.
They are part of that sandwich generation where you're taking care of maybe elderly parents, and you also have kids, and you have all these other demands on your life, and there are things that you want to do, and you have your own personal goals, and then nature kind of says, oh, by the way, we're going to make you hot and sweaty. We're going to add another thing to your plate. And I think what Veozah does is it comes in and it offers a non-hormonal treatment to women who choose. It just offers another option for women who may want to manage hot flashes.
That's wonderful. And options were limited. Like, you've discussed in length that prior to this, it was just hormonal replacement therapy. And that has its own side effects. And so this is, again, a very landmark approval. I personally have not heard of many drugs to treat this specific, the symptoms of menopause, like hot flashes. So it has been very, very overlooked. So that's really, really wonderful. And we're really happy we were able to cover the story and have you on to tell us a bit more about this. And I'm
delighted to be on. I always love to talk about Veozah because
it's amazing. And could you tell us about some of the clinical trial results actually that led to the FDA approval? I know that you talked about a survey that you conducted and things like that could have maybe been part of the data that went towards obtaining that approval.
It was, but certainly the data that we had to generate was very much that, controlled. Yes. And the fezolinetant, or the Veozah program, was a very large clinical development program. It was called the Bright Sky program. And the cornerstone of that program were 3 clinical trials, and it was Skylight 1 and Skylight 2, which were our pivotal trials, our efficacy and safety trials, and then Skylight 4, which was a study that we did only to ensure the safety profile of Veozah, understanding, this is a potential therapy that will be going out to a large number of women. So really having a thorough understanding of the safety profile was incredibly important to Astellas. But Skylight 1 and Skylight 2 were our efficacy and safety trials per FDA guideline for the development of a treatment for hot flashes. You need to demonstrate efficacy at weeks 4 and 12 after the start of treatment. And those are how we assess efficacy, but the time points at which efficacy assessed rather for registration. But we actually did these studies, Skylight 1 and Skylight 2, for 1 year. So we did them for 52 weeks. And what we saw related to efficacy was both the trials demonstrated a statistically significant and clinically meaningful reduction in hot flashes. We recently published the Skylight 1 data. Actually, all of the data from Skylight 1, 2, and 3, or 2 and 4 have been published. But we published Skylight 1 in the Lancet, and there's some wonderful graphics in that publication which show that not only did we see that decline in hot flash frequency and severity at weeks 4 and 12, but we saw the maintenance of that effect all the way out to week 52. So we didn't see any evidence of tachyphylaxis, so like rebound or a lack, a decrease in efficacy over time. We saw that indeed Veozah maintained that reduction in hot flashes. Most women in our trials, about 60% of women had a reduction of 50% or more in their hot flash frequency. About 30% saw a 75% decrease in the reduction in hot flash frequency. And I think it's around 10%, women reported that their hot flashes were eliminated altogether. So it was not an insignificant reduction in hot flashes. We also saw very similar results for severity as well. The remaining hot flashes were less severe if women still did continue to have hot flashes. So in general, certainly a non-hormonal treatment that worked to improve frequency and severity of hot flashes. In terms of safety, like I said, we did Skylight 1 and 2, and we also did Skylight 4. And Skylight 4 was specifically to examine safety. And what we saw in that study and in our studies overall, our most common adverse events were abdominal pain, elevated transaminase tests. We also saw, really, I would say, I think what's important to remember as well is that actually the rates of these elevations in adverse events were quite low. These were not significant percentages of women, but generally a very acceptable, certainly from the FDA perspective, safety profile for this drug.
That's great. And so when will Veozah, if it already hasn't hit the market, and when can, if not, when can we expect to see it on, or is it by prescription?
It is.
Okay.
It's prescription only. And it has been distributed to pharmacies.
Okay,
so
wonderful.
that was really important for us as well, was we didn't want to have a drug approval and then tell people like, well, it's going to be 6 to 8 months before you can get this. So we were really focused on ensuring that our supply chain and our manufacturing procedures were going to be able to get this into pharmacies as soon as possible.
Wonderful. And so has Veozah been approved in any other countries, any other regions, or is the FDA approval the first, or maybe among the first?
The FDA approval is our first.
Oh, nice.
But we have done sequential or somewhat parallel and sequential submissions. We're under review with EMA right now, so under review in Europe. And we also have a development program in Asia, which is a little bit further behind. We just had positive results in our phase 2 studies in Japan. So really looking forward to continuing that development program as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And so what are, I like to always kind of end off by knowing more about, of course, the future goals of the drug, but also the company and like what types of other drugs are in the pipeline and what we can expect from Astellas in the short and long term.
Yeah. So obviously, I think, fezolinetant is, or Veozah. I still have trouble calling it Veozah. I mean, it's a great name, first of all, but like for so long being part of this program, we referred to it as the generic name.
The generic
Veozah,
compound, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So Veozah, I think we're really proud. Astellas is focused on going wherever there is unmet need. And I think Veozah is a strong example of that. And we will continue to explore opportunities for Veozah moving forward. And what that will end up being is certainly under discussion. But I think with this success and just showing that, we're listening to what patients are telling us they need, listening to what HCPs are telling us they want for their patients. And what Veozah presents, I think, which is so important, is another choice, another option for patients. Especially patients, and we didn't touch on this earlier, but there's a lot of patients that can't, they can't take hormones. They can't.
Yes.
So again,
exactly.
this is an option, and it really comes down to ensuring that patients and physicians, whether it's for Veozah or one of our oncology products or any of our other products, that they can sit down, they can be fully informed, and they can have that dialogue about their treatment. I think that's a really important part of Astellas culture.
That's wonderful. Very, very important to address those unmet needs, and very happy to hear about the great work that Astellas has been doing and to get to this landmark approval. So, Marci, thank you so much once again for being on the show. It was lovely conversing with you and to learn more about Veozah. And I'm sure it's going to be more of a household name for hopefully and easier to be on the tongue as more and more people become aware of the drug, and and hopefully can help them with what they're experiencing in terms of hot flashes.
Yeah, that's the best thing, as a researcher. You just want to hear people say like, this really helped me. And that's why we do what we do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing what you do. Once again, thank you so much for your time. And that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you like today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you enjoyed our discussions today, please share the episode with your friends and colleagues, and be sure to subscribe in order to be notified when a new episode is released. To join in on the discussion, you can find Xtalks on social media, email podcast@xtalks.com, or comment on the articles directly. Links are in the show description. Take a moment to join our community at xtalks.com to get access to everything we have to offer, including webinars, job listings, virtual meetings, articles, and more. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers sharing them. They should not be taken as professional advice and do not necessarily reflect the policy or position Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.